I'm going to respond to this video by Captain Diesel talking about the myth that black comic books just don't sell.
Since the inception of DC So White, there's been a lot of different talking points from people that don't agree with the campaign, people that feel like it's a waste of time, people that feel like it's performative, whatever it may be. And I want to tackle and discuss a couple points and why I think those points, honestly, kind of dumb, but also are kind of made in bad faith when you understand how comic books work within the industry. And the first one I want to kind of sit down and discuss is the idea that these comic book characters don't sell. That's why Marvel or DC or whoever it may be don't put these books in the forefront, which again, we're more so talking about DC in this conversation, so I'll break down DC, but the things I'm going to break down are going to apply to pretty much every publisher as a whole.
So this is like kind of a misconception that a lot of people have when it comes to racism, is that they assume white as the default. So the assumption is, oh, well, just those black comic books don't sell because people don't want to read black characters because that's different than the default. That's different than the norm. For some reason, the existence of black characters automatically makes it a black book or makes it something else. But that's just not true.
If you guys want to know what I have to say, I'll break this stuff down. Stay tuned after the intro. Roll it.
You're now watching the Captain.
So looking at numbers, right? Let's break down truly the numbers and how these numbers are analyzed by these publishers. So first and foremost, I need you guys to understand that Marvel, DC, or any other publisher as a whole does not get data from individual sales that shops have. You going into your shop and buying 15,000 issues of a book that's in stock at that shop does not get accounted for from that publisher. The way
This is a big secret. It feels like a trade secret. I don't know why they don't, like, this is not on a neon sign that is just screaming at you the moment you go into any LCS. It is true. If you walk into your LCS and you see a Miles Morales book or you see a Static book, and you go, you grab that book and you go, you check out, that sale paid to the LCS, yeah, they got their money, but Marvel and DC, they've already been paid by this point because the LCS had to buy the books in order to get them in the store on the shelf. So Marvel and DC don't count that as an extra sale.
works is the pull list and pre-order system. Since Diamond, the big publisher that every comic shop or every comic book publisher used to use back in the day, kind of went down and was acquired by somebody else, there has been no way to directly target and keep track of direct individual comic book sales. So the way it's done, like I said before, is through pre-orders and pull list. A pull list, for people that aren't aware or maybe are new to the channel, are essentially pre-order accounts for a comic book shop. You're saying that, hey, I would like this book.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that you can get a pull list. Sometimes shops just do it in person. So like you got to go in your shop, you got to talk to them. But sometimes they're part of, I think Comic Geek does it. That's where I usually put my pull list, and my LCS is on there. I was able to find them. And then you can just go through and you can just grab whatever books you want and you add them to your pull list. So that means that the store is going to pre-order that book before it comes out. You just got to make sure that you put it on your pull list before the final order cutoff date.
As soon as it comes out, to be put on hold for me, and I can come back at any date in my leisure and pick this book up, buy this book, and walk out the shop with it. So why is that important? Because when you have a comic book shop that is in the business of selling books, they don't want to overbuy in stock of a book. If they don't know how well a book is going to sell, how much interest there is in a book in their immediate consumer base around them, then they want to make sure that they're not going to buy too many so they just don't take L's and lose a lot of money, especially when a lot of these shops are mom and pop businesses and don't have a robust amount of money to work with. They can't afford too many L's and books not selling. So, and to negate that, and what most shops do, and damn, I think every shop does do, if they want to be successful, they have their pull list set up. And with the pull list, they look at how many books or how many issues of a book have been pulled in people's list in their shop. If there are 100 or 200 issues of a Batman book being pulled, they know, okay, we at bare minimum have to have 200 books pulled, because we know all 200 of those books are a high chance of being sold because people are directly asking for those in their pull box. But we also make sure we have some on the shelves for people that don't have pull list accounts, or the casual fan that walks in off the street has an option.
And usually how this works is the amount of pulls, depending on what the property is, that is going to be the direct line to how the LCS is going to buy the books. So yeah, if there's 200 pre-orders, then the LCS is going to buy not only 200 for the pre-orders, but they're probably going to buy, like, where they would have bought 50, maybe they might buy an extra 100 books, because it seems like this book is super popular. As soon as people find out about it, word on the street, they might move 100 books easy.
By the books. Maybe they'll buy let's say 220, 230 books. So that way they have those books stocked there. And in addition to that, there are things called incentive covers. Covers that are essentially variant covers, like special covers that certain artists do for these companies that they only give out to certain shops when a certain amount of books are ordered. So let's say there's going to be a very special variant cover, that's an incentive cover done by somebody like Alex Ross, right? A very popular artist that everybody loves within the comic book industry that genuinely has dope covers. We know that we're going to have him do an incentive cover. So for you, comic book shop, in order to get a copy of this incentive cover, you have to order at bare minimum 20 issues of this book before we give you one cover. So for every 10 issues you order,
there's a lot of conversations over whether or not there's too many variant covers and things like that. But yeah, this is true too, that, you know, the variant covers that you might want, you can also put those on your pull list too if you're using like an app or something like that.
we're going to give you this one cover. So shops have to figure out, okay, cool. I have 200 issues that have already been pulled. I know there are going to be people that want this specific variant issue. It's going to be a special issue. Let me make sure I get enough to satisfy the people that pulled this one issue, but also enough to where people coming in off the street may want to pick up this incentive issue, or other hardcore fans who want this issue because their fans and artists want to pick this up as well. So you go from 200 issues being pulled to a shop buying maybe 300 issues, or somewhere around that ballpark, maybe 250. So they can get a bunch of the issues that have already been pulled, as well as issues that can be sold later on. This is extremely important because when they take this list and this amount of books in this order they want to order, they then go to Marvel or DC and say, hey, I want this amount of books. So then those big publishers say, cool, these shops have this amount of books pre-ordered. Let's then print that exact amount of books, maybe a few extra, because it's not in their best interest to have a bunch of books sitting around their warehouses. They say, all right, cool, we are going to give you guys all the books that you pre-ordered, and we're only going to track in regards to sales, the sales that the actual comic book shops themselves are spending. So that gives you the logical observation that, hey, these books are already paid for and accounted for by DC, by these shops. The shop sales are what matters, not your individual sales to them when they're gauging a book's popularity. That being said, what makes it all that much more interesting is that DC or Marvel, any publisher can say, all right, cool, if this book has extremely low pre-order sales, we don't even want to take the chance of giving this book a chance to flop or find an audience. So we'll just take these books and cancel them. There's been certain books in history, even as recent as a couple years ago, I think Imperial, I believe, with Marvel Comics, to where pre-order sales were so low for the book that the book got canceled before it even hit the shelves. So like the first issue, I think, was the only issue to even go out, and then they canceled the series from there because pre-order sales were so low. Now, is that indicative of how good the book is? No, because nobody has even read the book at this point to gauge how good the book is. They're just seeing pre-order sales and the interest is low, so they cancel the book. Now, you're probably saying, well, how does that benefit what you're trying to say, Captain? Why is this an issue with DC in particular? Well, let me break this down for you. When you're looking at some of the more popular characters and teams within comic books, most of the time, those characters do not immediately catch on right away. When you're looking at a team like the X-Men, right, in their first inception, a team that has been heralded as one of the more lucrative IPs and teams in comic book and media history, and they were heralded and created by the godfather of comic books and Stan Lee. Those books, when first debuted, were not very popular. In fact, the X-Men in themselves didn't really become very popular until like 10 to 15 years later, when other writers like a Chris Claremont came on board to write for those characters and then help to popularize them through the 80s. And
as quiet as it's kept, it's not really a quiet secret that Marvel was on its last legs in the 90s.
super soared through the 90s. So why is that important, you probably ask? Because in those 10 to 15 years that those books didn't sell very well, they continuously would put out there. Even if the books didn't turn a huge amount of profit, they put those books out there and they allowed for them to find their audience. And when they found their audience and they clicked, it becomes the greatest IP known to man ever, damn near. Now, am I asking for Marvel and DC to put a black book out there and not let it sell and let it go on for a decade? No. I'm just saying give a book the adequate amount of time to find an audience. If that means that it's going to take an L, cool, because books that involve characters that are brand new or characters that are underutilized are probably going to take L's because they don't have a pre-established fan base in droves waiting for that book to come out. There's a million Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman fans out there that eat up any stories that involve that character because they've had years and years upon years of those reading those comics, watching those characters in animated series or movies, or playing with them in video games. They have a pre-established nostalgia and notoriety around those characters, so it doesn't take a lot of marketing for those characters. But when you're debuting any new product, whether it be a comic, food, whatever it may be, a movie, you have to put in a lot of work in marketing that thing to make sure it finds its audience. Because if you don't, it won't sell. Now, again, you need even deeper layers of why DC has these issues and why I have issues with the way DC moves is because you have these characters that have been around in like a Black Lightning for like literally since the 60s damn near. A character that is a foundational member of your entire universe, but you don't give him any ongoing runs, so you don't try to put him at the forefront of a lot of stuff, and that makes things difficult for him to find an audience. If you don't put him to the front, he doesn't find an audience. When you compare him to somebody like Storm from Marvel Comics, right, a character that has gotten a couple books that she's even led X-Men teams, and she even has an ongoing book that's going on now. She got to be as popular as she is because they continuously put her in X-Men story after X-Men story after X-Men story. She was just around and doing things, and people eventually gravitated to this character. You put in the legwork to get this character popularized within your fan base. So then you go.
Storm on the X-Men was inescapable. That's what they should do with these other characters. Like, just put them out there so that people will consume them.
Over the DC side of things, and why I tend to raise the people's eyebrow at what they have going on is because I'm looking at how these books are being marketed and the due diligence that they have in committing to these characters. And that kind of goes into the conversation as to why mainline titles are so important to us when we look at the DC So White campaign. Because another thing that comes up is, well, what about Absolute Green Lantern? Well, Absolute Green Lantern, like we mentioned before, is in the Absolute Universe, a variant universe that is on a temporary time clock. We know even going forward when Absolute comics are done, they're not going to have any long-term impact on the history of the mainline DC titles, which means if you give a new writer to come in and want to do something with a character, he has nothing to pull from, and this character damn near doesn't exist if it's a brand new character in that very universe. Because the Joe Mullane that we see in the Absolute Universe is not the Joe Mullane that we have in mainline comics that we see in the Green Lantern Corps book, where she's a part of that. Her stories in that do not reflect her stories in this. So you don't give a character a mainline book and allow them to have moments that change and alter the way the universe works, then they essentially don't leave a footprint and you're not committing to that character and making them do something in your mainline version. It shows a lack of commitment. Although you're giving maybe miniseries here and there where you can do things, from a viewer standpoint, it gets a little tiring when you're only giving this character essentially scraps and you're not committing to making them a bigger part of your universe. So getting back into the number side of things, right? If you don't give a book time to find an audience, right, and you don't market a book before it even comes out or during the time it's running, how do you expect pre-order sales to go up? Because if I'm somebody who wants to pre-order something, right, I'm seeing a commercial for this thing long before it's even available for me to pre-order. You're looking at video games. They drop ads and commercials and gameplay and stuff for video games months to sometimes even years before you can even pre-order that thing. So by the time pre-order sales open up, you can pre-order it in droves because you're aware of that thing going on. If a brand new game comes out and I never heard of this game or I don't know what this game is, I'm probably not going to pre-order it. Not because I'm not interested in it or I wouldn't enjoy it. I don't know it exists. So you have a black book like, let's say, the Shadows of Dakotas, right? The static.
Exactly. We need to know about these books. That's the other reason why everybody's so upset with DC in particular, is because DC doesn't advertise when it comes to the black characters, and then you guys have no problem going, oh, well, the characters didn't sell. Of course it didn't sell. You guys didn't advertise that you were selling anything. Nobody can buy something that you don't tell them that you're selling.
what that was going on. You saw a lot of people buying the trade and buying issues after its runtime and being so curious as to where the book is because they saw there was a cutoff and the book got canceled. Well, because you were pre-ordering the book during its runtime, it got canceled relatively quickly because they didn't see direct interest in that, and the comic shops nor did DC and Marvel want to have a lot of extra. They want to take L on that book. So this is where I got to get into the conversation of me saying that I don't think DC is malicious or racist by any means. I think they operate like a business before anything creative. They don't think of these comic book characters as creative entities in themselves usually. They look at them as a product that is to be sold. So if you don't look at this product as something that you have to promote or take L on initially, you're not going to see the right side of the other side of how successful.
I'm gonna call it racism because the downplaying of black characters just because they're black characters. That's the other thing too, is that is what they're doing. Yeah, it's a business decision, but it's a business decision based off of a racist ideal. The business decision that they're making is that black people don't sell, or black people don't buy books, or black people are cheap. It's all ingrained in that mindset that black people are somehow lesser than, so they won't buy the books, or their stories won't sell, or people won't relate to them, or whatever. You can come up with a ton of different reasons that all sound like business reasons, but at the core of it, it is just black people are less than white people. So we're not going to invest our time in that because that is a waste of money.
Nothing can be when it's marketed correctly. So when you have a character, let's say like Vixen, right? A character that everybody's excited about getting an ongoing run because they want to see Stephanie Williams write this character and because she did a whole pitch for it. If you don't give Vixen, let's say you give Vixen a book, right? And you even get Stephanie Williams, the person that everybody wanted to have on that book, and you don't tell everybody that this Vixen book is coming out. They won't pre-order the book because they don't know it exists. Even though we know there's a large online audience of people that talked about wanting that book because they saw how dope the premise was. But if they don't know it exists, they can't pre-order it. If they don't pre-order it, then the sales for it are going to be low because shops aren't going to order it, and then DC isn't going to print it. So then you're going to have low sales in that. I think the perfect example of how I think DC doesn't do their due diligence and making sure that these things are marketed correctly is the most recent Dakota Incident, right? A book that everybody believes sold very well and did very well because it got to a second printing. When you look at speaking to different comic book shops, and
that book did really well because we talked about it. That's why that book did well. We talked about that book ad nauseum. We told everybody about that book. We told you to tell 5 people about that book. We did all the legwork in marketing, and DC didn't do shit about it. The writers and the artists themselves came out to personally spend money to market the book because I guess DC, they're hurting for cash these days. Once DC gets a lot more, name recognition and capital behind them, I'm sure they'll be able to afford stuff.
Ask them how many issues of that book they ordered. Outside of like Midtown Comics or the larger shops that have all the money because they have all the fans, they didn't order a lot. Go to like your local mom and pop shop that had the Dakota Incident and ask them how many issues they sold. And I promise you, they didn't buy that many. And when you don't have that many things in stock and people go buy them off the shelves instead of pre-ordering them, it's going to look like this thing was highly successful. And I think most of the success for this book came from the online conversation of people and content creators saying how much they loved it so much and how the minor amounts of books that were sold led to shops ordering a few different more of them. So again, the book had some sort of success, yes, because the books that were in stock were bought off the shelves, but the success that the book could have had was capped off because there wasn't a lot of pre-order numbers and pull lists that included that book in them. People just went to shops to buy them off the shelf because they thought that's how things needed to go. So yes, although it got a second printing, and more than likely won't get a third. And when you go online and try to find numbers.
Exactly. And that was something that a lot of people said to us, that we were wasting our time trying to promote this book because that's not how it works, which is fine, all well and good. It got to a second printing. And this is the moment that we can take a step back and go, listen, that's how it got to a second printing, but it won't get to a third because we didn't do any of the pre-order stuff. And that's the stuff that we need to be doing. The problem is, it can't just be the content creators telling people this. Like, DC has to tell people this.
In regards to how much this book sold, you're not going to find obvious straightforward ones because again, there's no way to track individual sales of books across all shops within the country or within the system because there is no system anymore. Diamond is gone. So that goes back into the DC So White campaign, right, as a whole, and why we are asking for not only these books to be created, but we're asking for these books to at least make it to trade, and we're asking for these books to be marketed and promoted as they're in their run so they can get the trade comfortably. Because when you let a book get the trade, it means it's going to lead to 5 to 7 issues, maybe 12.
There's a completely different group of people that only buy for the trades because they don't want single issue comics. They don't want boxes and boxes and boxes of comics. They want a bookshelf. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So us asking for the books to be getting to a trade isn't weird at all. And it's not like it's it's not like it's not marketable or it's not worth it. It absolutely is.
Depending on how long the book runs. And it gets into a trade paperback. A trade paperback is usually how most casual fans end up buying their comics because they want to get all these stories in one go. They usually buy trades or sometimes the omnibus, but usually omnibuses kind of scare people away because, and I guess I said omnibuses.
Omnibuses? Did you just? Okay. Anyway, Trades are great ways to introduce people into comics because a lot of times the cliffhanger nature of single issue comics, people aren't really into that. You know, what, 20 pages, 25 pages, 30 pages, and now we're done? What happens? Exactly. So people want the full story. Those are great gifts. Those are great ways to introduce people to these characters. So getting to a trade, like I said before, is not a weird thing to ask.
It's a fun thing. Inside job. They usually scare people away because they're a little bit more expensive. So trades are in that middle ground of like they're affordable and also have multiple issues of that story within that one confined thing that you can pick up and read. You don't have to worry about picking it up day by day. So let's run this hypothetical scenario, right? We get the Vixen book written by Stephanie Williams with how even like Jamal Campbell or whoever else doing art for the
like an omnibus, by the way, is every single story by that character. So like usually those are gigantic.
Book, like an all-star team of black creatives on a all-star black character. You give them that book, you promote that book on your socials, you maybe even do the unspoken thing of spending money on a YouTube video or an ad for that book to go out somewhere, whether it be on YouTube or Shorts, whatever it may be, similar to how Marvel put out ads for Blood Hunt when Blade had his own event, and that thing was everywhere, and that event did very well for them. You do something similar to that, and you put that out before the book comes out, and you put out little posts here and there discussing the book as it's coming out. You have Stephanie Williams or the creative team go to different content creators to do interviews, because I need people to understand for other indie publishers and some other publishers, I think that they do when they're rolling out a book is that they send the writers and the creative teams of those books to content creators for interviews. They ask the content creator, hey, would you mind interviewing this artist and this writer for this book, because this book is right around the corner, and them doing this would help market the book. If they did something as simple as that and asked and set those things up, that would do wonders. So if you do ads and promotion before the book comes out, you have the creative.
If you just advertise the books, if you build it, they will come.
Creative team and your marketing department puts some stuff out during the run for it and it gets a trade, we are pretty confident and very much so confident that this will showcase a very successful book more than you've ever seen beforehand because you did your due diligence making sure this thing is successful. Because what it looks like on the other side of things when it does it is a Dakota Incident, a book that comes out that you spend time making that you put no marketing behind. Because for people, I need you to understand, if you go back and scroll through all the social media for DC Comics, the only ad you're going to see about the Dakota Incident first and foremost is going to be them announcing the second printing, because there was no commercial, there was no ad for the Dakota Incident. Any commercial you saw for the Dakota Incident was one that was created by the creative team. Joseph Illich and the rest put money towards getting a motion comic ad done for it, and they individually reached out to different creators in the space to ask for interviews about the book, and then different creators after that reached out to them as well, in additionally to get that book marketed well. The creative team did all the marketing work for that book, and that book performed how it did in limited.
The creative team was the marketing force behind that book. They got that book sold.
Space with them being the only ones behind it. Now imagine if the corporation that put thousands of dollars behind the actual art and storytelling for the book actually gave a deal about marketing the book. How successful do you think that book would be? Again, that's just how I get into the nitty-gritty of all this, how I want to break this.
And that's the other thing too. They spend so much money. That's the thing. Like, yes, printing is one more step, but they already spent so much money getting the book made at all that it's like, it's such a waste.
Done explain it, because when you look and pull the layers back with this issue, it's a multi-layered issue that isn't as simple as, oh, black characters don't sell. No, black characters aren't marketed, black characters aren't pre-ordered, therefore these characters aren't selling. Not because the interest in the characters aren't there, but because you're not doing your due diligence to let these characters find their audience. When you're looking at a character like a Miles Morales, like a Jon Stewart, like a Vixen, like Storm, these are characters that have been put in other projects like animated series, video games, and movies. Mr. Terrific being a prime example in a movie recently. They're putting these projects that have marketing dollars that are marketed correctly, and we see just how popular those characters are. When we saw X-Men 97 and we saw Storm have her moment in the first episode, how many times did we see people online making edits and reposting how dope that scene was and how much they love Storm? We saw Miles Morales in his own leading movie, his animated movie, and how that's one of the best grossing animated films, period, and that's a black character. We see.
That's another thing, like, as quiet as it's kept, I don't know why people think that black characters don't sell when white people fucking love black characters. Like, that's the thing. Black people are cool. Like, y'all like the black characters as soon as they come out. You guys enjoy them. You just fucking pretend that you don't. Like, it's just so strange because as soon as they do get the marketing behind them, it seems like these characters take off, but they don't want to do that part.
Jon Stewart and his popularity in the Justice League animated series and even past that. When they are put in projects that are marketed correctly, that either feature them or have them in leading roles and leading capacities, we see those things be successful. One of the biggest examples of all time being Black Panther, a character who had some success and some notoriety, but when he was announced and marketed correctly in his own debut movie, that movie broke box office records. Even DC at the time, and Bob Iger put out an email to all his staff showcasing how much he underestimated how successful that particular movie would have been and how this going forward is going to change the way that they look at characters and IP and stuff going forward.
And this goes back to what I was saying earlier when I was saying that, like, this kind of idea of white is default. The assumption that black characters won't sell simply because they are black characters is so profoundly wrong that it's just steeped in racism. Like, there is nothing about it that is true, because at the end of the day, white kids dressed up as Black Panther too. Like, people like these characters.
and we did so well. So again, black characters can sell, black characters have interest, and black characters have value if you treat them correctly and treat them, honestly, how you treat most of your other characters that you value. But that's a bigger conversation. So again, I'm not saying this in a way to say that DC is inherently racist, but saying in a way that there is a flawed system that DC has been kind of running on autopilot for a very long time, and the system needs to be reforged and changed around into a way it's conducive for other people. Because I want people to also understand in this campaign, it's not just for us black people, it's a cultural shift. Because if they treat black people correctly in this and how they market these books, they can also apply this to Latinos, Asian characters, to indigenous characters, to queer characters, all these other characters that have a lot of interest in all these spaces outside of the comic book space. People that love comic book characters but don't buy comics love these characters because they are put in other pieces of media that they consume and they are marketed correctly. So if you do all this stuff correctly, you can have a renaissance of new founding fans coming into comics and wanting to check out these characters because they are being marketed correctly. But this has been another installment of Captain Diesel's Dojo. And y'all, before y'all leave, I want you guys to know two things. First and foremost, my Kickstarter for my comic book company.
So on this show, we always try to big up the Kickstarters and stuff. So I'm gonna let the captain tell you about their Kickstarter real quick.
Some graphic novels that we have going on right now. We have a Kickstarter for a trade paperback called The Gambit. A trade paperback is going to include the first issue of all of our flagship stories, including one of my own stories I wrote recently in Reaper issue 1. You guys, if you guys go to the Kickstarter, which will be linked in the description below, and you back this Kickstarter, you guys will be able to back that and get the issues I mentioned before as far as the flagship stories, as well as previews for future things that we have coming out down the line. So you guys will get a full encompassing view of who we are and what quality of books we can create at Echelon Graphic Novels. Beyond the Kickstarter campaign, guys, to make this video get to more people so people can understand how the comic industry works in this regard, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, hype the video.
Like, subscribe, do all the things so that you see more of these videos. So do me a favor, go ahead and support that Kickstarter. Big up the captain. But yeah, these books can absolutely sell. There's just a really kind of tricky way that we have to go about doing it. So just remember the pre-order system, guys, and tell more people about it. Now remember, I only ask you guys ever to do two things. One, go drink some water. Two, do something kind. And I'll see you next time. Peace.